In the town where the fog never fades and the dead never sleep, there stands a school forgotten by time, Blackthorn Academy. The walls remember every scream, and the halls still echo with footsteps that don't belong to the living. Tonight we open its doors once more. Welcome to Unholy Whispers. In the fog-choked town of Blackthorn Hollow, nestled deep in a valley where the sun seemed to forget its duty, stood Blackthorn Academy, a boarding school with walls older than the oldest graves in the nearby cemetery. The students, a mix of misfits and prodigies sent away by parents who could afford to forget them, whispered about the cafeteria's food for weeks. It wasn't just the usual complaints about soggy fries or rubbery eggs. No, the meat served at dinner had begun to taste wrong. It was too tender, too sweet, with a metallic tang that clung to the tongue like a bad dream. The head chef, Mr. Grivens, a hulking man with eyes like oil slicks and a smile that showed too many teeth, dismissed the grumbling. "Special meat," he'd say, his voice a low rasp, as he stirred a bubbling pot in the kitchen. "Sourced fresh. You'll learn to love it." The students, uneasy but hungry, ate anyway. They had no choice. Blackthorn's rules were ironclad, and skipping meals meant detention in the damp, windowless basement. Among the students was Clara, a sharp-eyed junior with a knack for noticing things others missed. She'd been at Blackthorn for 2 years, long enough to know the school's quirks, like how the clocks sometimes ran backward or how the library's books occasionally rearranged themselves. But the meat was different. It wasn't just the taste. It was the way it made her feel. After eating, her dreams were vivid, violent, filled with shadows that moved with purpose. One night, she woke drenched in sweat, the image of a clawed hand reaching from under her bed still burning in her mind. She wasn't the only one. Her roommate, Ethan, whispered about hearing footsteps in the halls at night. Footsteps that didn't sound human, too heavy, too deliberate, with a dragging scrape like claws on stone. Clara started keeping a journal, noting every oddity. The meat's strange flavor, the way Grivens watched them eat, the faint reddish stains on his apron that never seemed to wash out. Then Tommy Whitaker went missing. Tommy was a loudmouth senior, always bragging about his family's wealth or his plans to escape Blackthorn's prison vibes. One morning, his bed was empty, his backpack untouched. The faculty claimed he'd run away, but Clara didn't buy it. Tommy wasn't the type to leave without his beloved leather jacket, still hanging in his dorm. That night, the cafeteria served Tommy's favorite dish, shepherd's pie, rich and steaming, with that same peculiar meat woven into the filling. Clara pushed her plate away, her stomach churning. Ethan, pale as bone, whispered, "You don't think?" She didn't answer, but her journal gained a new entry. "Tommy's gone. Shepherd's pie tonight. Smelled like him." The other students ate, some with relish, others with grim resignation, as if they sensed something but couldn't name it. The school's atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with unspoken dread. Clara noticed other changes. The cafeteria staff, once a rotating cast of bored locals, now consisted only of Grivens and 2 silent assistants with hollow eyes and movements too smooth, too synchronized. The meat dishes multiplied. Meatloaf, meatballs, stews thick with glistening chunks, and the portions grew larger, as if the kitchen was desperate to empty its stores. Clara and Ethan started sneaking bread and fruit to avoid the meat, but hunger gnawed at them. One night, Clara caught Grivens staring at her from across the dining hall, his smile curling like a predator's. She swore his teeth looked sharper, longer, than they had before. That same night, she found a scrap of fabric under her plate, torn and bloodied, embroidered with the initials TW. Desperate for answers, Clara and Ethan broke into the kitchen after hours. The lock was old, rusted, and gave way under Ethan's pocketknife. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of copper and decay. The walk-in freezer was padlocked, but Clara's hairpin and a whispered prayer got it open. What they found wasn't beef or pork. Hanging from hooks were shapes, human shapes, skinned and gutted, their faces mercifully gone. Ethan gagged, dropping his flashlight, which spun across the floor, illuminating a corner where something moved. Not human, not animal, but something else. A hulking figure with too many limbs, its skin glistening like wet tar, its eyes glowing faintly red. It let out a low, guttural hum that vibrated in their bones. Clara grabbed Ethan's arm, and they ran, the creature's claws scraping the tiles behind them. They hid in the library, barricading the door with a bookshelf. Clara's journal shook in her hands as she wrote, "Monsters in the kitchen. They're feeding us the missing." Ethan, trembling, suggested telling the headmaster, but Clara laughed bitterly. The headmaster, Mrs. Vane, had always been too calm about the disappearances, her smile as cold as Griven's. Clara suspected she knew, maybe even approved. The library wasn't safe for long. At midnight, the books began to whisper, pages flipping on their own, revealing drawings of creatures like the one in the freezer. Multi-limbed, eyeless except for those burning red pinpricks, mouths lined with needle teeth. One book, bound in what looked like human skin, opened to a passage about the feast, a ritual where the school offered its students to ancient things that lived beneath the valley. The next day, another student vanished, Lila, a quiet freshman who loved sketching. Her favorite dish, lasagna, appeared on the menu that evening. Clara noticed Grivens lingering by the serving line, his eyes scanning the students like a butcher appraising livestock. She and Ethan rallied a small group, for others who'd stopped eating the meat, to investigate the basement, where detention was held. The stairs creaked under their weight, and the air grew colder, wetter, as they descended. The basement was a labyrinth of damp stone corridors, lit by flickering bulbs. They found cells rusted and ancient, some with scratches on the walls, names, dates, pleas for help. At the end of a tunnel, they discovered a chamber with an altar, stained black with old blood, surrounded by symbols that pulsed faintly, as if alive. The creatures were waiting. 3 of them, their bodies a grotesque blend of insect and reptile, scuttled from the shadows. Their mouths opened, revealing rows of teeth that spun like grinders. Clara's group scattered, screaming, as the monsters lunged. One boy, Marcus, was too slow. His scream cut off as a creature's claws tore through him. Clara and Ethan reached the stairs, but not before a claw grazed Clara's arm, leaving a burning wound that throbbed with unnatural heat. Back in their dorm, they panted, planning their escape. The school was a trap, they realized, built not to educate but to feed something ancient, something that demanded flesh. The meat wasn't just the missing students. It was bait, laced with something that dulled the mind, made the others compliant. Clara's journal became their manifesto. She wrote of the creatures, the altar, the school's true purpose. They spread the word in secret, passing notes to students they trusted. But trust was scarce. Some, addicted to the meat, turned feral, their eyes glinting with the same red glow as the creatures. One night, a group of these tainted students cornered Clara and Ethan in the dorms, their teeth bared, hands twitching like they wanted to tear flesh. Ethan fought them off with a broken chair, giving Clara time to grab her journal and run. She hid in the chapel, an abandoned building on campus, its stained glass windows depicting scenes of sacrifice, humans offered to many-limbed gods. There, she found an old groundskeeper, half-mad, who whispered of Blackthorn's founding. A pact with the things below, sealed with blood, renewed every generation. The groundskeeper gave Clara a rusted key and a warning. The creatures could only be stopped by destroying the altar. She reunited with Ethan and their remaining allies, planning a final stand. They stole gasoline from the maintenance shed, intending to burn the basement and its horrors. But Grivens was waiting, no longer human. His skin had split, revealing a creature like the others, his mouth a gaping maw. "You can't stop the feast," he hissed, his voice layered with others, ancient and hungry. The fight was brutal. 2 of their group fell, torn apart as the creatures swarmed. Clara doused the altar with gasoline, but before she could light it, Mrs. Vane appeared, her eyes glowing red, her body twisting into something serpentine, her voice a chorus of screams. Clara struck a match, and the altar erupted in flames. The creatures howled, their bodies convulsing as the symbols on the walls faded. Vane lunged, her claws sinking into Ethan's chest. He gasped, shoving Clara toward the stairs, his last act to save her. She ran, the fire spreading, the school's walls groaning as if alive. The creatures pursued, their screams echoing through the collapsing tunnels. Clara burst into the open air, the school ablaze behind her. The fog was lifting, revealing the valley's jagged cliffs. She clutched her journal, the only proof of what had happened. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called for help, or maybe the town was in on it too. Clara hid in the woods watching Blackthorn burn. She didn't know if the creatures were dead or if they'd retreated to whatever hell they came from. Her arm still burned from the claw wound, and at night, she heard whispers in her head, urging her to return, to taste the meat again. She burned the journal, hoping to sever the connection, but the words lingered in her mind. Weeks later, hitchhiking far from Blackthorn Hollow, she saw a diner advertising special meat on its menu. The chef, a man with oil-slick eyes, smiled at her. Clara ran, knowing the feast wasn't over. It had spread. Years later, Clara lived under a new name, always moving, always watching. She avoided meat, her dreams still haunted by red eyes and grinding teeth. She heard rumors of other schools, other towns, where students vanished and cafeterias served strange dishes. The creatures or their masters were patient. They'd waited centuries. They could wait longer. Clara kept a knife under her pillow and a lighter in her pocket, ready for the day they found her, because she knew they would. The feast was eternal, and she was marked. If the whispers reached you tonight, don't run. Feed them instead. Hit the like button, leave your fears in the comments, and subscribe before the darkness takes another soul. This is Unholy Whispers, where the stories never end, and neither do the screams.